Welcome back, brothers, tourists, and ladies, to another episode of the Chapter House, the Old Glory Club's look into our individual chapters and the men who make them. Joining us on this episode 6 is the Peninsular Vanguard, our boys out in Michigan, specifically near the Detroit area. And representing the Peninsular Vanguard today is Scott, the president. How are you, Scott?
Good. Good to be on.
Good to have you guys. Paul Atreides, a little known fact from Detroit, the vice president, also joins us.
Hello.
And Nicholas, founder emeritus of the Peninsular Vanguard. How you doing, man?
Doing well. Happy to see these guys will look me in the eyes after I went over to the enemy.
Oh, there's some deep lore there. Well, welcome, guys. You guys are the furthest west that we've spoken to so far. I think you're the only ones. No, Alabama's on a different time zone too. Well, close enough. But what's it like being out in Detroit? It's got a storied history, and right now it's not doing too well as far as I'm aware.
It's doing a little bit better than it was in decades past, but it definitely has its fair share of problems still.
Yeah, it is easy to look better when you bounce off rock bottom, but it is not untrue to say Detroit is better now than it was at its worst.
Detroit has this really uncanny what's the character where you'll drive for like 5 minutes and you go from dilapidated crappy buildings that you wouldn't want to spend 5 minutes to nice museums and buildings and business districts, and then you drive 10 minutes out somewhere else and you're in the middle of farmland.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Curtis.
No, I was just going to say I haven't been to Detroit, but I was very close sometime last year visiting some friends up there, and I don't remember the name of the town, but it just looked like a little sleepy suburb. But knowing that I was that close to Detroit, I was a little, I guess I wasn't too surprised seeing how white flight out of the urban areas kind of, builds up those nice suburban towns. But what's it like trying to get membership in the Detroit area? Is it mostly from the suburbs, or do you have people in the city proper?
We have a couple of guys from sort of downtown areas. Even those guys, though, really are more like, I don't know if you're familiar with these areas, but like St. Clair Shores and Grosse Pointe, which are quite urban themselves, but they are definitely suburban in their own sense, or enclaves at least. No, we don't really have any members from the city itself. I think that's largely a demographic thing. A lot of people from the suburbs that, as you said, had been built up over time from white flight, and it can be difficult because that kind of situation created basically what amounts to a huge, like, basically urban sprawl. So even though a lot of people are centralized around the Detroit area, that Detroit area is an hour and a half across for a lot of guys.
Yes, and because no one is in the center for obvious reasons, that does make organizing meetings occasionally something of a logistical challenge, because you have everyone that's in the Metro Detroit area, but you have people that are on opposite sides of that area, and no one wants to meet in the middle because the middle is Detroit.
We also have a couple people who are much further out, so out in the middle towards Lansing or up further north. And so it's always kind of feels kind of sucky to tell these guys to drive 2 hours for a single meetup. So we've been trying to be flexible with where we can go.
I'm trying to launch Grand Rapids and Lansing like sub chapters at some point too.
Well, that's great. Were you guys thinking like a lodge system, or was it more of just kind of get like a sister?
We've kind of been debating that for a while. Some of our guys think that the club should be really a sort of local business, a local function, that you have to be within driving distance of another guy to be in the same chapter with him. Whereas some of us are more inclined to the position that we would be better off as a united state. with the lodge system, like you said.
One of the things we talked about in the conference is whether or not we should have online meetings. And one of our members, our previous president, was adamant that we should not, that all our official meetings be in person. There are costs and benefits to either setup, but having online meetings would allow more people from around Michigan to become members, but would also make it more difficult to meet up with them in person, which I think is the spirit of the organization.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think that's an accurate assessment. But I know that, given how easy and convenient the online stuff is, and how difficult the proximity is, I'm actually surprised to hear that you guys don't do online meetups. That takes a lot of dedication. That's great. How do you feel the membership handles it? Like, how frequently does everyone show up?
Well, we've been instituting over the past couple meetings a pretty strict attendance policy. So far, it's been pretty successful. We have a pretty good attendance rate. I would say it's easier for us right now to do all in person, because almost everyone in our chapter is Metro Detroit. Even though there is that sprawl to it, there's only a couple of guys that we're in regular contact with that are more than 2 hours out from centralized meeting locations.
Yeah, that's an interesting little tidbit. So when you guys say that you might want to keep the one chapter and then build the lodges out from that, obviously that's going to affect whether or not people are going to be able to meet up as frequently. Is that something that you guys discuss when you're talking about like bringing things online?
Yeah. We're there's definitely more camaraderie in person, and obviously there are aspects of the club that just can't work online. But I suppose that there are chapters that get around this. Are you are there chapters that do exclusively online meetings, or mostly online meetings?
I'm aware that some of them do mostly online, or at least the regular weekly meetings are online with, 1 or 2 meetups in person per month. But, it's different for every chapter. I mean, Central, for example, we're spread out across the entire continental U.S. So, we can't really do the meetups in person as often. But
yes, I mean, I've since moved states. That's why I'm founder emeritus. And chapter I'm currently in does do scheduled business online and then less formal meetings in person. And I can see pros and cons to either format. I know with, at least when I was with PV, I felt I knew the members much better simply because we only did meetings in person, so I could always put a name to the face, and it was that much easier to get a feel for the roster.
We got to get that one up on Ohio in there.
Perfect. I love the internecine fighting. It's a competition. That's the word for it.
Friendly competition.
Yeah, that's an interesting little tidbit, and I hope it serves as an example to all the other chapters listening. Our friends over in Oregon recently put out a piece on leadership and things like this, and they say that making the bigger asks is better than making the smaller asks. And I think that this example of having every meeting be in person is a good example of a slightly bigger ask than it would be just online. About how long has this chapter been around? When did you guys found?
It's an interesting question. I think we officially incorporated. We started that process not too long after, it would have been the 2024 event, but we'd been meeting unofficially for quite a bit longer. When I went to the 2023 event, I had already been in the weaving, the thatchery scene, shall we call it, for several months, and most of our initial membership was pulled from there. once the national chapters were announced, or not the national, the local chapters, excuse me, were announced at the 23 meeting, myself and the person who became our first vice president, we made the deliberate decision to hold off on officially founding anything until we had done meetings for several more months. We got the feel for everyone, and then we started the incorporation process.
So there was a bit of did you guys take this time for security reasons, or was it just like trying to figure out whether or not this was a good fit for everybody?
You could call it security, not that we had any real doubts. It was more just we just wanted to get to know everyone who was involved a bit better before we said, yes, we're founding this thing. Because we did have enough people from the start, but some had been weaving longer than I had. Some had only been to a couple of meetings. And so we just wanted to make sure the group that was starting was a bit more close-knit before we committed to anything official.
And are all three of you founders, or is it did some of you come in a little bit later?
Yes, actually, funnily enough, I believe it's Scott and I are the only two founding members here at the moment. I was the founding president. Scott was our fifth member at the time. We've actually had some turnover as people have moved on to other things. Like our vice president will likely be moving for work related reasons soon. I myself had to leave the state to pursue educational interests.
I think part of that too might be just gauging by what I've heard from other chapters and from what I've heard from these streams. I think we might have, on average, a much younger population than a lot of chapters, and so a lot of people are, still trying to make their way, sort of. A lot of people moving out for college, a lot of people moving out for grad school, a lot of people moving out for jobs, that kind of thing.
Well, that's encouraging to hear. We always want, me being an elder millennial, I always want the youth to come in so we can help build them up, and that this enterprise lasts a little bit longer than just one generation. But so with so many members being in a transitory period of their lives, did you guys find it was hard to be more flexible with the changing of positions, or have things been kind of smooth in the way that you guys have been able to shift around the leadership?
I don't think it's been so difficult so far. There were some coordination questions that had to be asked about. A lot of information trickled down over time from our previous president, which is Nick, our founder.
Yes.
But I think we've gotten the hang of a lot of it. I think also we're a smaller chapter right now. We're a little less organized than I think a lot of the East Coast chapters are. So I think there hasn't been quite as much to deal with yet. I imagine in the future, transitions from one presidency to another might be a bigger deal and might be something we have to prepare more for.
Yes. It also helped that both myself and our VP knew in advance by about a year that our time in the state was limited. So we were able to set up transition well ahead of time.
Yes.
So that Scott here knew most of what he needed to know when the handover happened, and that helped make things very seamless.
Well, that's great to hear. You guys said that you're unofficially about 2 years old, but officially as a chapter, you're like a little over a year. In that time, what do you guys do for activities? You don't just get together to talk business, I'm sure.
Right now, so we're working on some activities. We're sort of just setting up. What we do right now, the big one that we've been instituting for the past couple months, is we're trying to basically get a every month we want to assign someone who has to host a sort of official event, whether that's a dinner party or some kind of barbecue or some kind of social gathering where there's a degree of responsibility and a degree of hospitality involved. And so basically that would be formal every month. that's one of the ones we're instituting right now.
So you said you guys will assign a new member every month, basically putting it on his plate. Like
Yes.
you have to do the event this time.
Somebody will, each month somebody will take responsibility for some kind of a hosting event. So that's one.
Well, that's a great idea. I mean, one of the issues with any of these kind of organizations is how do you get people, involved? How you get people to stay active within the club? And I think that again, making the ask of those members is a great idea. How has it been shaping up so far?
I think so far it's been pretty successful. We've done about has it been 2 or 3, I think, of them. So far of the official gatherings, and I think they've been pretty successful.
That's great. In the future, are you guys looking to what kind of events are you guys looking to hold? 'Cause right now, what you said, it sounds like they're more sociable events, like
Yes.
Hosting your
Yes.
brothers. But do you see that evolving into something a little bit more formal?
Yeah, we've been thinking about ways to do that. Though there's been some discussion about what we could do outside of that context, like, charity work would be an example. Obviously we can't, there's certain things we're not supposed to do. There's been discussion. But we haven't really come to anything super conclusive outside of those more formal sort of hosting kind of situations. Maybe like historical stuff, like doing. I know the East Coast. Some of the East Coast chapters did recently. Was it a tour of a battlefield, I think, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, that was the Delaware Crossing Society is known for their historical tours.
Yes. So that was another thing that was discussed. Something like a green. I don't know how many people outside of state have heard of this, but we have something called Greenfield Village here, which was set up by Henry Ford, and he basically stole a bunch of historical landmarks from the rest of the country and brought them to this particular outdoor museum, and it's a very interesting locale. So we thought that could be something historical that we could do. Outside of that,
we also have done things like dinner nights. We're trying to set up board game nights. We do. We did a museum visit. A lot of times.
Was more academic than social, but and so a lot of social things.
We're also trying to plan things like camping trips and other events like that.
Yeah, and then we have also talked. We've been trying to get our guys familiar with we're not involved in any activism at all. We're trying to get our guys familiar with how civilians engage with the civic process, and on that, in that realm, we've been trying to encourage members to gather information about how their local government works, basically.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, in this kind of age of generalized apathy, it almost seems obvious that young men should be engaged in at least the local political process of how their town or their municipality is functioning. And there is a large gap in that understanding between the generations. So that's really good to hear. And just generally, in Michigan, it seems like there needs to be, especially that kind of thing from people around Detroit. Speaking of which, you mentioned, what was it, Greentown?
Oh,
Greenfield Village.
Greenfield Village, yeah.
Greenfield Village. Could you expand on that a little bit? It sounds interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's actually a really cool. It's an extension of the Henry Ford Museum. They use it. It's basically this huge sort of outdoor area where they've set it up to look like they sort of use it for historical reenactment. It's basically this giant town of a big mesh of a bunch of different historical Americana, but all of the buildings there, or most of the buildings there, are actual authentic historical buildings. So, like, for example, they have Thomas Edison's laboratory that they moved there brick by brick. Is I think one of the most popular examples. But there's a lot of, I think they have the Wright brothers, something to do with the Wright brothers.
Yes.
So there, I don't know how he did it. Henry Ford was quite the innovative, I guess, politically innovative in some ways, maybe. So he somehow managed to steal or purchase or acquire all of these artifacts.
Yeah.
And so we have them all for some reason.
Yes,
So
yeah,
that's really cool.
and thanks to Mr. Ford's craftiness, that Greenfield Village entertained many a childhood for me growing up.
Yes, same for me, and I think a lot of historically minded Michiganders.
Yes, actually, one of my formative memories of like just what Detroit is actually happened at a trip to Greenfield Village. I recall we were the family was on our way to the Henry Ford Museum, and my father pointed at a point you could just see physically, where on one side of the road the grass was normal, it was lush, it was green, and on the other side the grass was either yellow and decaying or was overgrown. And he just said, "You see that? You see that line, son? That's Detroit." And because you could just physically see the difference on management, because on one side of the line was the Henry Ford Museum and Dearborn, the city of Dearborn, Michigan, and on the other side you had Detroit, and you could see where that boundary was without ever looking at a map.
Well, that's really interesting. I mean, everyone kind of knows, everyone across the country knows that Detroit was Motor City, and it was where Henry Ford had all of his factories and his little villages. And one of our contemporaries across the pond, academic agent, frequently cites Henry Ford as this kind of living legend, or I guess this posthumous legend, who really seemed to be everything that an aristocrat, a noble ruler should be. Could you guys talk a little bit about the legacy that kind of lingers on in the area?
Well, we did have some things we've
Well, practically every hospital is named after him.
Yeah, that's a pretty visual.
Yes.
I think the thing with, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I know, at least growing up, one thing I've seen a lot is the public perception, sort of like your common everyman's perception of Henry Ford is, he was a very successful, but he was very mean. One thing that always features in any sort of like museum info card about Henry Ford will always mention that he was very mean to his son Edsel, and that this proves Henry Ford was a bad man because he had a strained relationship with Edsel Ford. I don't know the full details of that relationship there, but it is characteristic, you might say, of a feminized society that we take this captain of industry and we reduce down his legacy to how mean or not mean he was to his offspring. And that is an important factor of a man's life, don't get me wrong, but it is a bit disappointing to see his history reduced down to that.
It's regardless of what that makes, what his relationship with the sun makes him, it's a very useful piece of propaganda, essentially.
Yes, yes.
Right, and we all know that you know, in the modern day, the materialists and the people who compromise what you might call progressives, they kind of want us all to have this idea that nothing was ever better than it is now, and that, you know, Detroit, even in its dilapidated and crime-ridden state, is actually better than it was, you know, 50, 60 years ago. And you said that you guys said that it's better than it was like even 5 years ago, but that's because it hit rock bottom.
Yeah.
I mean, what was Detroit? I mean, you know, people will say like, oh, Detroit used to be known as the Paris of the United States, and like every city in the United States held that title at one point. Even Hartford, Connecticut had that title at one point. So, you know,
I think
was Detroit like at its peak?
I think what sets Detroit apart is that for a period of time, it was essentially the tech capital of America, previous to the modern tech industries, because of the auto industry. Detroit was where people would move if they wanted to work on the cutting edge of industry in the United States. And I think we have some stats on that.
So what, while you're looking for that, what would you say it was that caused Detroit to fall so far? Like, are you aware of around what time it really started falling apart?
Yeah, that was it was during the Great Society program that it really started to fall apart under President Lyndon Johnson, because Detroit was supposed to be the prototype for that program, is my understanding. Now, this is to an extent the sanitized story, because most conservative stories about what went wrong with the Great Society focuses on the economic issues it created, because it tried to sort of centrally plan a city, and, you know, as Stephen Crowder would tell you, it did a socialism, and the Great Society was wrong for doing the socialism. But that was you know, really a big part of why this program was as disastrous as it was, because of the demographic effects it had and the white flight which it affected. But that program, regardless of, you know, which parts of it you want to assign blame to, that was when things really started to go bad for Detroit.
That's interesting. I didn't realize that Detroit was kind of the prototype for Johnson's Great Society, or, you know, welfare administered state. Was that? Do you have any idea or any notion of why Detroit was chosen as that as the test bed?
I believe.
Sorry, go ahead, Scott.
Wasn't it the sizable African American population?
I would imagine so. Yeah, that actually makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right.
Okay,
great.
we're back.
I see our boys in the chat are sufficiently amused, which is good. So let's see if we can just keep going. Right. The dizzying heights of Detroit at its peak, down, brought low to the sorry state that we see it in today.
Yes.
How did this happen?
Sure. Scott, if you could follow up after me, I think to really illustrate just how far Detroit fell, it's first good to get an idea of just how high it was at first, and that puts into context just how dramatic this was. So Detroit was not just an industrial city. It was, at its heyday, one of the most productive in the world, just because there was a confluence of so many things that came together just right. So you had part of it was just access to the Great Lakes system. Michigan has more freshwater coastline than California has tidal coastline. Just to put that into perspective, not everyone thinks of, you know, the Midwest as being a coastal area, but the Great Lakes are there. Through the Great Lakes and the Erie Canal, you have access by waterway to the Atlantic seaboard and to all of America's built-up cities on the East Coast. You also have very close natural resources. The Upper Peninsula, once upon a time, that wasn't just the retirement homes for boomers. You had very productive copper and iron mines there, and they're closed down now, but you can still go into the Keweenaw and just go 15, 20 minutes off the beaten path and just find caves and rock faces that are just green with oxidized copper. So you had a lot of natural resources in one place. You had very good connection to the trade network by virtue of the Great Lakes, and through nearby Illinois, you had access to the Mississippi River system as well. And all of this came together to produce highly efficient steel production, some of the most efficient in the world. I think the only thing that would really compare is like the Ruhr Valley in Germany, which is actually kind of fitting because you had a lot of German immigrants coming into Detroit in the late 19th century, which is why Detroit, even before the auto explosion, was a big industrial city doing stoves and horse carriages and things of this nature. That was a very natural segue into the auto industry. So, it wasn't just, provincial chauvinism that caused Henry Ford to build the auto industry in his home state. No, Detroit was actually a very natural, very intelligent place to do this buildup because there was so much there already, and he made it so much bigger.
Yeah, and I think as you mentioned earlier, too, these things mattered a lot more back then before a lot of transportation technology that we have nowadays.
Yes.
Like, it doesn't matter quite as much if there's a lot of copper and iron mines in the UP nowadays, but it mattered a lot back then.
Right.
Right. I imagine that Detroit doesn't really do any smelting anymore. So with Lyndon Johnson's Great Society targeting Detroit, for its obvious wealth and its relatively high black population, how did this decline really get going?
Sure. Scott, if you'd like to take the lead on that.
A huge part of it was that with such a high African American population, historically, and I have a personal connection to this phenomena through my parents who grew up in Grosse Pointe. What they would have observed is that prior to a lot of the push for civil rights, a lot of policing was done essentially on a community level in ways that more organically. So they were much more, we could say, more. There was a more personal element to the way that they would exercise the law, which was probably healthier for the communities. Definitely healthier for, say, Grosse Pointe. But the downside of this policy was that cops would, as our enemies would point out, they would prejudice, right? They would sometimes justify, maybe sometimes not. But that is the downside of this kind of non-bureaucratic law enforcement. And what happened?
Recognize patterns.
Yeah, you start to recognize patterns.
I prefer the term observant.
Observant. You start to recognize patterns, and then you start to act on them, which is unfortunate from certain perspectives. But what ended up happening was, in the push for civil rights, all of this had to go. So what you see is a lot of these policing patterns that were quite effective for governing a large African American population in Detroit basically fall out of use, and you get a lot of what you see today actually in a lot of other big cities. I think I mentioned this, but like the riots in San Francisco, Portland, New York, not so much in Detroit anymore, I think. But you definitely it's a very similar phenomena, I think.
Yes, although I think Detroit's riots, back when it was still the best of something, were some of the deadliest.
Yes.
That ever were.
Yes, I was more saying that similar in the policies that produce them and the incentives that produce them, like the reason for these riots being allowed the way they were was the same.
Right. Yes, and that all culminated. So this was the prototype for the Great Society. It was part of like a sub program. I think the Model City or something like that was the name. It's escaping my head at the moment. but that ultimately culminated in the person of Mr. Coleman Young, who is Detroit's first black mayor. He had a very boisterous inauguration, which is, I know some people have might make observations about just how extravagant and how much money was spent by this individual as soon as he had a modicum of power and disposable income. But that's not for me to say. And he, it was like, so the inauguration, like this like 3-day affair. There was a symphony there. There was like there was all kinds of public figures from the areas. But one thing that really stuck out to people is that Mr. Young told criminals to, quote, hit 8 Mile Road. And well, he said after the fact that what he meant was he wanted criminals to get out of Detroit. What many observers interpret this to mean was that he was telling these criminals to go to the suburbs, effectively, chase after all of the white flight that had just happened. This earned him not inconsiderable controversy at the time.
So how does this this piece of slang, like what's the etymology of the 8 Mile Road? I've never heard. I mean, I imagine this is where, for the elder millennials in the audience, Marshall Mathers got the name of his movie, also known as Slim Shady. What was he was from Detroit, I believe.
Yes.
The naming is from the literal street names. There's an 8 Mile and a 9 Mile and a 10 Mile road going north.
As you move out from the city center, it's how many miles you are away from the city center. It's quite effective in a certain sense.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So at that time, 8 Mile Road was basically a wider area.
Yeah,
well, it was a road. It was a major thoroughfare leading out of Detroit to the wider areas.
But there is a sort of there has been a gradual creep of the periphery of Detroit, the crime, the crime and the things that generally accompany it have tended to creep north as time goes on. So like when Coleman Young was becoming mayor of Detroit, 8 Mile was suburban, but nowadays 8 Mile is a total mess. It's basically the ghetto. Whereas even I'd say out to like 11, 12 Mile is essentially ghetto at this point.
So
that's not inaccurate.
Was this decline like just strictly linear? Like it just they started this project and it just went down, or were there any resurgences of, I guess you could say, sane and effective rule within the city, or was it just one bad administration after another?
Well, after Kwame, they did the state they Rick Snyder did reincorporate Detroit. I believe that was talked about actually at the last conference. But they gave it back to the city, and I suppose actually the most recent mayor, Dugan, right? I suppose he's been doing a better job than previously. Not to say that Detroit is a shining beacon of the kind of governance that we might be looking for, but certainly I would say it's more sane. They've been much more interested in carving out a space in the city that is essentially they're interested in gentrifying certain parts of the city, which has worked more or less pretty well.
Yes,
in the last decade.
Although I would say, like, the caveat there is the thing about Detroit is that the nice parts they're actually pretty nice. Like it's a nice place to spend an afternoon and go to eat. But even when you're in the nice parts of Detroit, this gentrification and revitalization,
you do have to put up with a lot of African American tourists, we might say.
Yes, and because the revitalized areas are very narrow, so even when you're in a nice part, you are 2 turns away from a very bad part at any given moment.
we haven't quite got what we want yet, but
There's a state park in the Detroit River called Belle Isle, and during the bankruptcy, it was handed over to the state to be managed. And since then, it's been a lot better managed, but you can still see, sometimes you'll see needles on the ground, and I saw a box of Narcan there the other day. But it's a beautiful park, but you do see the effects of things, of the population.
Well, that's a shame. So, I mean, obviously Detroit wasn't always like this. What was the like kind of the historical makeup of Detroit? I don't know what the current demographics are, but I imagine they're a lot like many of our inner cities, where it's how do you say it, majority minority. But this wasn't always the case.
I mean, in the early years, it was settled by German and Polish immigrants, and that contributes a lot to the Catholic population here.
Poles too. Poles are highly Catholic also.
Yeah.
Not to mention Detroit's even earlier history as a French colony. It was called Detroit once upon a time. Many will applaud the fact that it no longer is.
But one of our members put together a demographics breakdown, and according to this, it's now 77% black.
Yes. Although, it looks like, let me see.
It's down slightly from a peak of 82 10 years ago, but
yeah. Yeah, and actually, in Henry Ford's day, the city was majorly, a majority white city.
Yeah, in the 50s, there seems to be a huge spike that just keeps going up.
So with the new mayor, and you say obviously it's getting better than it was with these gentrification projects. But this is kind of the story of every American city now, where in the 50s and 60s, the cities were abandoned by the white populations owing to the increase in crime due to the lack of policing the minority neighborhoods that kind of spilled over into the rest of it. But these little like kind of oases of gentrification, I mean, it famously in Washington, D.C., there were many areas that were gentrified specifically by large gay populations, but they're still kind of in a sea of crime. Would you guys say that there's any long-term plan to bring back any sort of like real policing in Detroit, or is it completely captured by people who think that, how do you say it, community psychologists might be the way to go?
In the neighborhoods surrounding Detroit, in the actual places where most people live, I don't think so. I don't think there's any kind of plan. I think all of the forces that are gentrifying the city center, or gentrifying these areas in the city center, basically have no interest in restoring any kind of universal legal order over the city. They're much more interested in securing areas where they can profit effectively, essentially, off of people who visit the city, tourists, people who come from, an hour out of it, which is around where we live, that kind of thing. I don't think there's any interest in committing the kind of police force that would be necessary to fix a lot of the neighborhoods.
I think, don't quote me on this, but I believe that Detroit has the most private security forces.
Yeah.
In terms of manpower and just different companies protecting, apartment blocks and, street corners and stuff. So people try to carve their own little square out, but
Yeah, the part of the city's revitalization over the past decade, I know, has been particularly led by, I believe it's Illich. No, it's not Illich. I'm blanking on his name. The guy who owns Bedrock. Do either of you remember his name? Well, the owner of Bedrock owns a huge portion of the downtown area. He owns a large variety of properties in downtown Detroit, and he basically single-handedly made that area safe for visitors with essentially a private security force, which is unfortunate in some ways. It's kind of interesting in others, though.
I'm afraid I have to head out for the evening, gentlemen, but it's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you for joining us, Nicholas.
Yep. Cheers.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, good talking to you again.
So yeah, this is an interesting. I did not know that Detroit had so much private security, and there's obviously a lot of talk on the South Africanization of the United States and the either inability or unwillingness of officialdom to actually use the police for their purpose. So, we all expect that this private security force being the norm just to increase everywhere. But you're saying that it is actually quite effective?
It has been in a limited capacity, I would say. Like we were saying, there are these areas carved out in the city center that are basically walkable, and you can visit there without really any threat of being assaulted or anything. But it's not a long-term solution for the city of Detroit as a political entity, because basically it requires leaving the neighborhoods themselves to marauders, essentially. Like, it's not like the downtown Detroit is not a sustainable community of it's not really most people don't live there. There's some people that live there, I'm sure, but it's not I think it's mostly it's just gentrifying these very small areas in order to build tourism.
Well, all right, guys. I mean, the Peninsular Vanguard certainly has their work cut out for them, getting men in an area with such an intense city. We're going to take a look at the super chats real quick. I'm sure that some of them were lost in the transition, but from the first stream, the Shadow Band for $5 gets in early with a salute. So we salute you, sir. And Christopher Burks 458 gets in with another salute, $2. Thank you for joining us once again on this restreamed episode here. Before we go, I was hoping to get something from all three of you, but now that there's two, of all the things that you guys have experienced putting together an Old Glory Club chapter and trying to get the people involved and get your footing, what do you think is the best piece of advice that each of you can give to the other chapters listening? And Scott, we'll start with you.
The best piece of advice.
Advice, or any hurdle that you guys had to overcome that seemed a little more challenging than maybe it should have been.
Yeah, I would say I would just advise people to put in the effort to actually come regularly to their meetings, and to even if you're not exactly sure what you'll talk about, or you're not exactly sure the trajectory of your organization, or you're not exactly sure if you're just trying to get something off the ground, what you really just need is bodies in the room. You need people that are actually showing up, that are actually interested, that you're actually interested in talking to and interested in being around. And I think if you get that, the rest kind of flows naturally from that. At least I think that was our experience.
Yeah, great. I mean, history belongs to those who show up, and like this show. Something that I've come to appreciate is that I never really know what each chapter is going to be bringing, what fresh new ideas are going to be coming out, and some of them have been very, very good. So just showing up is a great way to maybe learn or think of something that you guys hadn't anticipated before. Mr. Atreides, what do you have for us?
I would say that the best piece of advice is just consistent scheduling. I know that every Thursday or every other Thursday is going to be dedicated to this group, so I can schedule everything ahead around that. We know that, every Thursday around 7 or so, we've got either an official meeting or an informal meeting, and I just know that's what I'm going to be doing that Thursday.
Yeah, our friend Dave Green, his favorite virtue is constancy, and I think that's pretty obvious for why that would be his favorite virtue. But thank you, Peninsular Vanguard, for joining us on this episode of the Chapter House. Be sure to join us next week, where we speak to the Old Hickory Volunteers and the rest of our catalog. Pony Express Radio tomorrow night at 8 p.m. and American Spirits every Monday at 8 as well, where the question of what is an American and what is our heritage is being answered. The American Spirits is probably the most important project that we're putting out right now, so please do tune in. And as for that, I'm NotMeNotYou. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having us.